Imagine for a moment that the most intimate thing you know, your own sense of being you, might be a magnificent illusion. From the time you first looked in a mirror and said your name, you have carried the feeling of an enduring self, a point of awareness sitting quietly behind your eyes. But what if that sensation is just a trick, a mental sleight of hand? Throughout history, philosophers have debated the nature of the self. René Descartes famously declared, "I think, therefore I am," suggesting that consciousness proves the existence of a thinker. Yet centuries later, thinkers like David Hume could not find any solid self within their own minds, only a bundle of perceptions constantly shifting and changing, like a river whose waters are never the same twice. Modern neuroscience adds another twist. When scientists peer into the brain, they do not find a central command center or a single place where the self resides. Instead, they see networks of neurons firing, processing sensations, memories, and intentions in parallel, a chorus of processes, none of which alone is the self, but together produce the ongoing narrative of I. Consider the split brain experiments, where the connection between the two hemispheres of the brain is severed, and suddenly it seems as if two separate centers of consciousness can exist within one skull, each with its own perceptions and desires. Who then is the real self? Is there a core or just an endless play of parts? Psychology, too, tells us that much of what we feel and decide arises from hidden mechanisms beneath awareness. The self you feel is not the author, but the narrator, interpreting and confabulating stories to make sense of actions already in motion. Buddhist philosophy goes further, teaching that the self is like a rainbow, real as an experience, yet ultimately empty of substance, a construction arising from conditions and vanishing when those conditions change. And yet, when you stub your toe, feel embarrassment, or fall in love, the sense of being you feels utterly undeniable, immediate, and raw. If the self is an illusion, it is the most convincing one ever performed. But can an illusion have real consequences, make real choices, feel real suffering? Or is the very distinction between real and illusion just another story we tell? What would it mean to live without a fixed self, to move through life like a shifting constellation instead of a solid point? As you listen to this, ask yourself, who is it that is listening? Is there someone inside, or only the experience of listening happening in this moment? The deeper you look, the more mysterious the answer becomes. And so, perhaps the greatest illusion is not that you exist, but that you could ever truly grasp what you are. The question lingers, echoing in the silence after the words fade. If you are not who you think, then who, or what is dreaming this life? Imagine waking up tomorrow and discovering that the person you think of as you is nothing more than a clever illusion, a story your mind tells itself every waking moment. What if the feeling that there is a permanent I behind your thoughts, your choices, and your dreams is not a fundamental truth, but rather the most persistent and convincing hallucination you will ever experience? From the moment we first say mine, as children, the sense of being a singular self, a witness at the center of experience, feels undeniable. It is the silent narrator behind every memory, the author of every plan, the bearer of every joy and hurt. But why do we believe so deeply in this self, and what if it is not what it seems? For centuries, philosophers have asked these questions. In ancient India, Buddhist thinkers challenged the idea of a permanent self, proposing that what we call I is only a bundle of ever-changing sensations and thoughts, like a flame that appears constant, but is never the same from one moment to the next. Meanwhile, Western philosophers like David Hume peered inward only to find a stream of perceptions with no core at their center. No self that remains the same over time. Yet the illusion is powerful. Psychology suggests the brain is a masterful storyteller, weaving together memories, feelings, and social feedback into a coherent narrative. We remember our past and imagine our future through the lens of this central character, making life possible as a continuous journey rather than a random sequence of events. Neurologically, experiments show that our sense of agency and ownership over actions can be disrupted or manipulated, hinting that the self is not a thing, but a process, a virtual avatar generated by the brain to help us navigate the world. The split brain studies are especially haunting. When the communication between the brain's hemispheres is severed, it is as if two separate selves emerge, each with its own preferences and awareness, challenging the very idea of a unified I. Cognitive science points to the default mode network in the brain, active when we daydream or reflect on ourselves, suggesting that the feeling of a self arises from constantly rehearsed patterns of thought, like a favorite song stuck on repeat. But if the self is just a construction, why does it feel so real, so essential? Perhaps it is because evolution shaped us to believe in ourselves as enduring agents, giving us the motivation to survive, to form relationships, to protect our bodies and our stories. The self is a useful fiction, a kind of virtual reality helmet that lets us make sense of the chaos around us. But is it wrong to trust this feeling? Or is the illusion itself the most important truth about who we are? The philosopher Thomas Metzinger suggests there is no one behind the curtain, only the play itself. Yet the play is what matters. Still, moments of deep meditation, extreme stress, or psychedelic experience can all dissolve the boundaries of the self. What if the person you call yourself is nothing more than a story your brain is telling you? A narrative so convincing that you never stop to question it. Imagine waking up tomorrow with no memories of your past. Would you still be you? The sense of self seems as real and solid as the ground beneath your feet. But is it truly real, or just an intricate illusion crafted by your mind? Philosophers have pondered this mystery for centuries, from the ancient Buddhist claim that the self is a bundle of ever-changing processes to David Hume's radical assertion that, when he looks inside himself, he finds only fleeting thoughts and sensations, but no core self. Modern neuroscience offers a surprising twist. When scientists peer into the brain, they find no single place where the self resides, no hidden command center. Instead, what we call I appears to emerge from a complex web of memories, emotions, and perceptions, stitched together by neural activity. Picture your brain as a theater where countless actors, sensations, thoughts, recollections, take the stage, each playing a part in a continuous performance. Your sense of being a single, unified entity is the result of this seamless play, where the scenes change, but the story seems to flow without interruption. Yet, is this unity an illusion? Psychologists point to cases of split-brain patients, where a severed connection between brain hemispheres can lead to two centers of awareness in one body. Cognitive scientists describe how our memories are not perfect recordings, but reconstructed tales, edited and reimagined every time we recall them. Our emotions color these memories, shaping who we believe we are. The self, then, may be less like a captain steering a ship and more like a ship tossed by countless invisible currents, always moving, never anchored. Thought experiments like the ship of Theseus ask us, if every plank of your being has been replaced over time, Are you still the same self? Is your I the sum of your parts or something more? Some philosophers argue that the self is a useful illusion, a fiction that helps us navigate the world and make sense of our experiences. Others believe there must be some deeper truth, some kernel of real identity behind the mask. As you reflect on the voice inside your head, the sense that you are the unchanging observer behind your thoughts, ask yourself, is this I a genuine entity or a clever trick of the mind? The search for the real self leads us into a labyrinth, where the closer we look, the more the self seems to dissolve into fragments, patterns, and stories. Perhaps the greatest mystery is not whether the self is real or illusory, but why the illusion is so hard to see through, and what it would mean for our lives if we truly did. The next time you catch your reflection or hear your name, consider, who or what is watching? Or maybe, just maybe, there is no watcher at all, only the endless unfolding of experience forever. What if the person you think you are is nothing more than a convincing illusion? Close your eyes for a moment and try to find the real you, the inner observer, the self that watches your thoughts and feels your emotions. Where is it exactly? Is it somewhere behind your eyes, nestled inside your brain, or perhaps hovering just out of reach in your mind's eye? Now ask yourself, who or what is doing the looking? As soon as you search for this elusive I, it seems to slip through your fingers like water, dissolving into a swirl of memories, sensations, and fleeting impressions. Throughout history, philosophers have probed this mystery. The ancient Buddhist tradition insists that the self is an illusion, a bundle of perceptions and experiences with no permanent core. In the West, David Hume famously wrote that, when he looked within, he could never catch himself without a perception, and never observe anything but the perceptions themselves. Fast forward to modern neuroscience, and the enigma only deepens. Brain scans reveal a network of regions lighting up when we think about ourselves, but nowhere do scientists find a central command center, a hidden homunculus calling itself me. Instead, our sense of self seems to emerge from a collection of processes, memories, language, sensory input, that weave together a seamless narrative. It's like a movie projected onto a screen, so vivid and captivating that we forget there's nothing behind the curtain. Yet, the illusion feels utterly real. It is the voice in your head narrating your life, the subject of your desires and fears, the protagonist in the unfolding drama of your existence. Cognitive scientists suggest that the self is a model built by the brain for practical purposes, a tool for predicting the world and navigating relationships. But if the self is just a useful fiction, what are we left with when the illusion is exposed? Imagine the classic thought experiment, the ship of Theseus. If you replace every plank and sail, is it still the same ship? Now apply this to yourself. Every cell in your body is replaced over time, your memories shift, your personality evolves. Yet you cling to a sense of persistent identity. Is that identity real, or just a story you tell yourself? Some thinkers argue that without a self, morality and meaning collapse. Others see liberation. If there is no fixed I, perhaps we can let go of old grudges, anxieties, and limitations. Still, the question haunts us. Who is watching right now as you watch this video? Is the search itself the answer, or is it a sign that the self is the ultimate phantom? As the science and philosophy swirl together, the mystery only grows more profound. Maybe the self is like a rainbow, real enough to be seen and felt, yet dissolving into mist the moment we reach out to grasp it. So tonight, as you close your eyes and drift into sleep, ask yourself one more time, who or what? What if the person you think you are, the one behind your eyes with memories, desires, and a secret monologue, was not as real as you believe? Imagine waking up tomorrow and discovering that the very sense of I you cherish is just a kind of useful fiction, a story your brain tells itself. This unsettling question has haunted philosophers for centuries, but modern neuroscience has thrust it into the spotlight with extraordinary evidence. Consider brain injuries. Patients who suffer damage to specific regions can lose entire aspects of their personality, their memories, or even their sense of agency, sometimes becoming almost strangers to their former selves. Such cases ask us, if the self was truly a single, unified entity, how could it change so drastically with physical alterations to the brain? Dive deeper into the mysterious world of split brain experiments, where patients, whose left and right brain hemispheres have been surgically separated, can display behaviors as if two conscious minds inhabit one body. One hand writes a word while the other draws its opposite. One hemisphere can answer a question truthfully while the other remains in the dark. These compelling phenomena force us to question: is there truly a captain steering the ship, or is consciousness simply a chorus of competing voices, only appearing unified? Disorders like dissociative identity disorder add another layer to this mystery, as individuals can shift between distinct identities, each claiming the title of I, each convinced of their own reality. From the vantage point of cognitive science, the self may be best understood not as a static thing, but as a process, an emergent property born from billions of neurons firing in concert, constructing the illusion of a single voice from a cacophony of impulses. Philosophers like David Hume doubted the existence of a core, self, comparing the mind to a theater where perceptions flit by in a constant parade, while some Eastern traditions have long taught that clinging to a permanent self is the root of suffering. Yet, even as science and philosophy seem to unravel the I, our experience of being a unified self remains inescapably vivid and immediate. Could it be that the very thing we hold most dear, our sense of self, is a masterful hallucination, carefully crafted by our brains for survival? Or is there something more, something yet undiscovered, that makes me truly real? Perhaps the ultimate truth is not that we are nothing, but that we are far stranger, more complex, and more interconnected than we ever imagined. As you turn off the screen and return to your thoughts, ask yourself, who or what is really watching? And if you look for the I, will you find someone there, or only the mystery staring back? Imagine for a moment that the person watching this, the one who feels hunger, joy, anxiety, and hope, is just a story the brain tells itself, a fleeting shadow rather than a solid, unchanging core. What if the sense of being an I is nothing more than a sophisticated illusion, a trick so convincing that it fools us every waking moment? Long before MRI machines could peer into our minds, ancient philosophers stood at the edge of this abyss and dared to ask, who or what am I really? In India, over 2,000 years ago, the Buddha taught that the self is like a chariot. Take it apart piece by piece, and you will never find a thing called self, only a collection of ever-changing parts. Across the world, the Greek thinker Heraclitus mused that you can never step in the same river twice. Everything is becoming, nothing is fixed, not even you. The Upanishads, ancient Indian texts, spoke of Atman, a pure consciousness underlying the illusion of individuality, while the Taoists of China wondered if the self was a dream the universe was having about itself. These ancient questions echo powerfully in modern science and philosophy. Neuroscientists dissect the brain and find no single control center where the self resides, just a network of processes, memories, and sensations knit together into a seamless narrative. Psychologists like William James described consciousness as a flowing stream, not a fixed thing. Cognitive scientists point out that our sense of self is constructed moment by moment through stories, memory, and perception. Consider the famous ship of Theseus. If you replace each plank of a ship one by one, is it still the same ship? Our bodies and minds change constantly, yet we cling to the idea of a continuous, solid me. Split-brain experiments show that even our most basic sense of unity can fracture, and people with certain brain injuries can lose their sense of self entirely. But if the self is an illusion, why does it feel so real? Is it a necessary fiction, an evolutionary trick that helps us survive, connect, and dream? Or is there some deeper, mysterious essence that persists behind the ever-shifting experiences? Perhaps the truth is stranger than either view, that the self is both real and not real, a dance between fleeting thoughts and enduring patterns. The ancients did not have fMRI scans, but they sensed this mystery in meditation, in paradoxes, in the quiet moments between thoughts. Today, we stand on the shoulders of their questions, using new tools but gazing into the same abyss. So ask yourself, when you close your eyes and listen for the I inside, what do you find? A voice, a memory, a feeling, or just silence? The journey to understand the self is not just a scientific or philosophical quest. It is the oldest of human mysteries, and perhaps one that can never be fully solved. As you go back to your life and the familiar sense of, imagine for a moment that the voice in your head, the one that says, I want this, I decide that, I am me, is not what it seems. What if the sense of self, the seemingly solid I at the center of your universe, is nothing more than a clever illusion crafted by your brain? Right now, as you hear these words, you feel like you are the conscious pilot of your life, making choices, setting goals, and steering your fate. But what if this feeling is a story spun by neural machinery that never actually reveals the true workings behind the curtain? Centuries ago, philosophers like David Hume probed the inner landscape of the mind and reported finding only fleeting sensations and thoughts, never the self itself. In more recent times, neuroscientists have peered inside the brain and found no single place where the self resides, only processes, patterns, and electrical storms. Meanwhile, cognitive scientists suggest that the self is something like a user interface, a helpful fiction that simplifies the chaos of perception and memory into a continuous narrative. Yet the illusion is so deep that, when you reach for a glass of water or decide to call a friend, it feels as though a real I is in control. This raises a haunting question. If the self is a mental construction, who or what actually makes your choices? If your thoughts and actions emerge from unconscious brain processes, are you ever truly the author of your decisions? The famous Libet experiments in the 1980s found that the brain initiates actions milliseconds before we become aware of choosing, suggesting that free will might be more like a post hoc story we tell ourselves. Yet other scientists and philosophers argue that subjective experience and conscious deliberation still matter, that responsibility and ethics do not vanish simply because the self is not what we thought. Some propose that even if the I is not a thing, but a process, it can still be meaningful, like a whirlpool in a river, formed by dynamic flows rather than a fixed entity. Imagine now the classic thought experiment of the ship of Theseus. If every plank is replaced over time, Is it still the same ship? Similarly, if your memories, preferences, and even your body change, is the self that makes choices today the same as yesterday? In Eastern philosophies like Buddhism, the self is seen as a bundle of ever-changing sensations, thoughts, and desires. Clinging to the illusion of control causes suffering, while recognizing its emptiness leads to liberation. Yet most of us cling to the feeling of being an agent, of having moral responsibility, of being someone who matters. Can both truths coexist? Is the self an elaborate hallucination, or is it a real emergent pattern, real enough for life, love, and loss to matter? As you consider your next choice, pause and ask, who is it that decides? And if the answer slips through your fingers like smoke, perhaps the real mystery is not whether the self is real or illusory. Imagine waking up one morning to realize that everything you think you are, your memories, your desires, your very sense of being, is built on an assumption that feels so obvious you never think to question it. That there is an I behind your eyes, a real self steering the ship of your life. But what if that sense of self is nothing more than a convincing illusion, a mental trick played by your brain? Let's begin with a thought experiment. Suppose there existed a teleportation device, like something out of science fiction. You step in, and it scans your entire body down to the last atom, then instantly deconstructs you and rebuilds an exact copy on Mars. The person who emerges has all your memories and believes they are you. But is that truly you, or just a perfect copy? If your old body is destroyed, does your self survive, or has it vanished forever? Now imagine a different scenario. Instead of copying you all at once, what if surgeons gradually replaced each neuron in your brain and every cell in your body with artificial parts, one at a time, until nothing biological remained? But you never lost consciousness, and your thoughts continued without interruption. At what point do you stop being yourself? Or do you ever? These perplexing puzzles have haunted philosophers for centuries. Ancient Buddhist traditions argued that the self is like a river, always changing, never the same from one moment to the next, and any sense of a permanent I is a convenient fiction. David Hume, the Scottish philosopher, searched for the self and found only a bundle of perceptions, never an observer apart from the thoughts and feelings themselves. Modern neuroscience paints an equally strange picture. When scientists scan the brain, they find no center, no command post where the self resides. Instead, your sense of being you is stitched together from networks of processes, sight, memory, intention, operating in parallel without a central conductor. The psychologist Thomas Metzinger calls the self a virtual avatar, a model our brains create in order to navigate the world, useful but not ultimately real. Yet if the self is an illusion, why does it feel so immediate, so indubitable? Cognitive science suggests our brains are hardwired to construct a story of selfhood, blending memories and sensations into a seamless narrative. But that narrative can shatter. Split-brain experiments, where the two hemispheres of a brain operate independently, sometimes produce two distinct streams of consciousness in one person. Cases of dissociative identity disorder show the mind can generate multiple selves inside a single body. Even our day-to-day experience is less unified than it seems. Attention shifts, moods change, and the I who plans for the future is not always the I who acts in the present. Still, many philosophers push back. Some say the self is not an illusion, but an emergent pattern. Real as a whirlpool is real, even if it is made only. Imagine waking up tomorrow and realizing that the person you call I is not a solid entity, but a seamless illusion created by your brain. A story woven from memories, expectations, and fleeting sensations. If the self is just a construction, relationships take on an astonishingly different hue. Your sense of connection with others isn't two distinct selves reaching across a gulf, but rather two collections of experiences and thoughts meeting, briefly intertwining, and moving apart. Love might no longer be about two souls, but about overlapping patterns of feeling and thought, a dance of neural activity rather than a binding of essences. Fear and ambition, too, might be revealed as patterns, automatic reactions arising from the brain's need to protect a bundle of memories and desires that it mistakes for a permanent self. When you feel afraid, is it truly you who trembles, or just a chain of impulses triggered by ancient survival instincts? Ambition becomes a restless drive, sustained by the illusion that there is an I to be advanced, a protagonist whose story must reach some grand crescendo. Suffering, then, is transformed. The pain of heartbreak, loss, or disappointment no longer belongs to a single enduring self, but is a passing storm in the ever-changing weather of consciousness. You might still feel pain, but if there is no one solid at the center, does the suffering have the same grip? And what of personal meaning? If there is no fixed I steering the ship, meaning might shift from being a quest for purpose unique to you to an ever-changing tapestry, a web of stories, relationships, and actions that are just as real or just as illusory as the self that perceives them. Life becomes less about defending a permanent identity and more about witnessing the mysterious unfolding of experience, moment by moment. Yet even as you grasp this, the paradox deepens. If the self is an illusion, who is it that is coming to this realization? And if meaning, suffering, and ambition are only tricks of consciousness, why do they feel so real? In the end, the construction of the self may be the most convincing magic trick of all, one that invites you to keep chasing the question, who or what is really living this life? What if everything you have ever called I is just smoke swirling in the air, a story whispered by the mind to itself? Right now, as you sit watching this video, you might feel certain there is a single, unchanging self somewhere behind your eyes, a persistent witness to every moment. But what if that deep certainty is itself the grandest trick? For centuries, philosophers have hunted for the self, slicing through thought and experience like explorers in a dark jungle. The ancient Buddhist sages claimed that the self is an illusion, a bundle of sensations and memories, clinging together so tightly that they seem like a single thing. The British philosopher David Hume looked inside himself and found only a theater of fleeting perceptions, never a core actor. Modern neuroscience joins the search, peering into the brain and finding billions of neurons firing in intricate patterns, but no central hub that could be the real you. Split-brain experiments, where the corpus callosum connecting the brain's hemispheres is severed, reveal something shocking. Sometimes two selves appear, each with their own desires and knowledge, trapped in one body. Which one is you, or are both? Cognitive scientists suggest that the I is a narrative, an ongoing story your brain assembles out of fragments, much like a novelist invents a character. But if the story stops, does the character cease to exist? Even in our daily experience, the feeling of a single self wavers. Think of a time you lost yourself in music, in sport, in a moment so absorbing that the I seemed to dissolve. Where did it go? Are we simply a collection of thoughts, sensations, and memories, like beads on a string, or is there a string at all? Yet the illusion is powerful. When someone calls your name, you turn. When you remember childhood, it feels as if it happened to the same you watching now. Could this be just the mind's clever way of creating continuity from chaos? Or is there a deeper truth, hidden behind the veil of ordinary awareness? Some philosophers argue that the self is real, perhaps not as a thing, but as a process, a river, not a stone. Others say that even the process is a hallucination, endlessly constructed and reconstructed in real time. If the self is an illusion, whose illusion is it? If the observer cannot be found, who has been listening to this entire video? And when the silence begins after these final words, who will remain to hear it? The journey to find the self leads us not to answers, but to a shimmering mystery at the heart of experience, a puzzle that may never be solved, and perhaps that is its greatest power.